Abandon all prejudices, all ye who enter here. Park your paradigms, perk up your ears, and open your mind, as we now shine the laser light of reason on the topic of the magnificent Dr. Fauci. Hi, I'm David Bolton, and welcome to Part 7 of this series of podcasts dedicated to helping people think more clearly, make sounder judgments, and, above all, to unceasingly question instead of naively accepting what others want us to believe, for this is the path of Socrates. Well, my dear listeners, if you believe Socrates was great, you haven't heard of Dr. Fauci. And if you haven't heard of Dr. Fauci, what, you haven't heard of Dr. Fauci? I will bet you that there are more people today that know Dr. Fauci than those who know Socrates. Perhaps an exaggeration, but I'm not sure what I would bet on there. Dr. Anthony Fauci. Well, let me read from an article from Newsweek, April 28th, 2020, just about a year ago. Dr. Anthony Fauci is an advisor to now then President, Donald Trump, and something of an American folk hero for his steady, calm leadership during the pandemic crisis. At least one poll shows that Americans trust Fauci more than Trump on the coronavirus pandemic. And few scientists are portrayed on TV as by Brad Pitt. I don't know about that. I'm living in Japan. Newsweek continues. It says this. But just last year, that would be 2019, the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the organization led by Dr. Fauci, funded scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology and other institutions for work on gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses. In 2019, they continue in Newsweek, with the backing of NIAID, the National Institutes of Health committed $3.7 million over 6 years for research that included some gain-of-function work. The program followed another $3.7 million 5-year project for collecting and studying bat coronaviruses, which ended in 2019, bringing the total to $7.4 million. It goes on to say in the end they didn't receive all that latter sum. So, Newsweek goes on. Many scientists have criticized gain-of-function research, which involves manipulating viruses in the lab, I repeat, to explore their potential for infecting humans, because it creates a risk of starting a pandemic from accidental release. So, just in case you didn't get all that, this article is saying that in 2014, because it mentions the 5-year project that ended in 2019, in 2014, Dr. Fauci, through an organization, committed $3.7 million to the Wuhan Laboratory that was studying bat coronaviruses. Even though many scientists have criticized this gain-of-function research because it involves manipulating viruses in the lab to explore their potential for infecting humans, because it creates a risk of starting a pandemic from accidental release. Now, this is Newsweek I'm reading from. I'm not making this stuff up. This is not some crazy conspiracy theory, right? Let's connect some dots here. Did you know? I'll bet you didn't know this. I'll really bet you did not know this one. Did you know Dr. Fauci is also a psychic? Oh, you didn't know that, did you? Well, I'm going to prove it to you here. Dr. Fauci is also a psychic. Because the great Dr. Fauci said in 2017, now this is from a USA Today study, there have been rumors going around that Dr. Fauci predicted an infectious disease outbreak during the Trump administration at some time in 2017. And the USA Today says, our ruling after talking about this says, it's true. I quote from USA Today. This is USA Today from what date? You might want to know the date here. It's from July 29th, 2020. Fact check. Fauci warned Trump administration in 2017 of surprise infectious disease outbreak. Let that sink in, right? Let's see here. Let me get back down. I have to scroll down. Rolling through. It says this. The claim that Dr. Anthony Fauci in 2017 warned the Trump administration of the likelihood of an infectious disease outbreak is true, based on our research. Fauci did not warn about the coronavirus specifically, as some posts claim, but rather that a more general surprise infectious disease outbreak would take place. I'd say that's rather interesting. Now we go to this. The Defender. It's Children's Health Defense.org. One of the people there is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He does a lot for helping children in health-related things. Also, Dr. David Martin. There's a fascinating interview, that is a conversation between these two gentlemen about Fauci, among other things. And here, in The Defender, they criticize Dr. Fauci. It says, for example, there's something called the Bayh-Dole Act. I'm not sure what that is. It led to Dr. Anthony Fauci profiting from royalties off university patents. I remember those two guys saying in that talk they had that Dr. Fauci has made a living of coming up with, well, maybe some vaccines or some things that he then gives to the pharmaceutical industry, and he gets royalties from that. So he's made himself a millionaire by that. It also says here, Fauci's involvement in dodgy deals and price fixing of medicines in the US. That's rather interesting too. But for our subject here, pertaining to COVID, a SARS vaccine, COVID is one of the SARS sicknesses, a SARS vaccine that was patented in March 2019, 8 months prior to the COVID breakout. In other words, I don't know which vaccine they're referring to, of the ones that are on the market now. Maybe the ones on the market now are variants of that. But what do we have here? Let's look at this. In 2014, Fauci sees to it that the Wuhan Laboratory gets $3.5 million. Wuhan Laboratory, that's one of the best laboratories in the world for the study of coronaviruses. Coronaviruses. More and more experts believe now COVID-19 is it's a coronavirus that's escaped from the Wuhan Laboratory. So in 2014, the Wuhan Laboratory that was dealing, among other things, with this gain-of-function research and with also seeing how viruses could be made to infect more people. This is what Fauci was giving money to in 2014. In 2017, he turned psychic and says, during the administration of Trump, there's going to be a big outbreak of disease. In 2019, he was involved in the patent of a SARS vaccine 8 months before COVID breaks out. And then the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, COVID breaks out. Must you be a Sherlock Holmes to connect the dots here? But I want to start this talk really with something much simpler. Much simpler than all these things. And that's this. Do you remember back, I think it was beginning of March 2020, COVID had just descended upon the world. And do you remember Dr. Fauci, when he was asked about masks, should people wear masks? And he said, no, that's not going to be necessary. I don't see any reason why we should. I forget his exact words. We're saying, no, you don't have to wear masks. Now, I, like most fools, I guess you could say, thought, well, okay, he's an expert, he knows. Of course, a few months later saying, oh, yes, you must wear masks. And a year after that, in 2021, he's been heard to say, we should wear maybe 2 masks. Now, let's think about this. Remember, this is the path of Socrates. We question, and we think, and we analyze, and we put the pieces together. How old is Dr. Fauci? I'm not even sure about that. He's over 70, right? Can you tell me? Can you tell me, please, my good friend here, it's called DuckDuckGo. I used a friend called Google, but since I saw what they were doing, censoring people and not putting up the results that you really typed in when they wanted to suppress something, I saw that again and again and again. So now I have a new friend. I kicked Google out, and now my new friend is called DuckDuckGo. And no, they're not paying me anything for plugging their company. Fauci. Okay, please, DuckDuckGo, tell me when Dr. Fauci was born. He was born in 1940. My God, he's 80 years old. I thought he was in his 70s. He's 80 years old. Okay. Now, he's an immunologist, right? And I think most people are under the impression that, well, he's been working this area all his life, right? National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases for many years. He's a director of that. Robert F. Kennedy, Dr. David Martin, say that he's been director of that for years, but he's not doing anything really in that area. Really listen to those two guys, the way they talk about Dr. Fauci. But anyway, Dr. Fauci, okay, let's assume he is a great expert in diseases, in infectious diseases, in viruses, right? Let me ask you this. Open your mind here. Forget politics for a minute, right? If you're on the left, you probably love Fauci. If you're on the right, you probably despise him. Forget all of this. Let me ask you some simple questions. Okay, Dr. Fauci is 80 years old. At one point, he studied medicine. I'm not going to question his academic credentials. Who am I? I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about this. I see he studied College of Holy Cross, Cornell University. He won different awards. Maxwell Finland Award, I don't know what that is. Ernst Jung Prize, don't know what that is. Lasker Award, don't know what that is. Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2008, I know that's I've heard of that one, right? Robert Koch Prize, the great expert in microbes, etc., won that in 2013. Yeah, I'd say this guy is an expert, right? I think everybody believes that. Whether he's an honest expert, that's another thing. Because you can have experts that in the end just want to make money. I'm not saying he's like that. Others have said it. But let me ask you this simple question. You're studying to be a doctor. I don't mean an immunologist, a virus expert. You're just studying to be a physician, right? As a physician, you naturally are going to come in contact with all kinds of bugs. With microbes of all sorts, with bacteria of hundreds of different kinds, with viruses of hundreds of different kinds, right? So what's one of the first things you think about, even before you learn anything about it? How to protect yourself. Now you've noticed, once you start studying medicine and before, that doctors often wear masks, right? Don't you think that you, even as a first-year medical student, might say to your professor, Professor, you just talked about, how we should wear masks when we're doing operations. Well, is that to protect against bacteria, against viruses, or what? Don't you think you would ask that in the very first class when they talk about masks, when you're going to medical school? Wouldn't you ask that? Wouldn't you be curious about that? I would. My God, you're going to be dealing with, maybe in a hospital, for example, with hundreds and hundreds of sick people carrying all kinds of diseases, microbes, germs, viruses, alien viruses, even, who knows, right? I want to know how to protect myself. And if I'm wearing a mask, which doctors do for operations, etc., I'd want to know what this protects against and what it might not protect against. And I'd want to know something as basic as, does a mask protect against viruses? Now, I've heard from experts, not Fauci, but from experts, that trying to protect yourself from a virus like COVID-19 and from many others is like trying, with a mask, is like trying to protect yourself in your garden from mosquitoes by putting up a chain link fence. Hint, it's not going to work because those holes in that chain link fence are much bigger than mosquito. And that's the way it is with viruses. The holes in a normal mask that most people wear are big compared to a virus, so the virus slips right through there. Can we wear a very special, really special, they used to say that it came in through the eyes too. I guess we should wear like hazmat suits all the time, right? I don't see anybody wearing them in the street. But from what I've heard, these masks are not going to protect against viruses. So now let me ask you this. Once again, getting back to Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci's not you or I. He studied medicine. He's a famous expert. He's won prizes. And yet, last year, when he was 79 years old, after a lifetime of being an immunologist and a great expert, when we're then hit with a pandemic that he predicted 3 years earlier, and a pandemic he might even have prepared thanks to his contribution to the Wuhan Laboratory. When that pandemic hits in the beginning of 2020, he tells us, oh, no, I don't think you have to wear masks. Does something seem strange to you about this or not? Doesn't he know at the age of almost 80, after an entire life of research and becoming one of the greatest experts in the world in immunology, and he doesn't know whether he should wear a mask or not? You know what that's like? Imagine A master carpenter is teaching you how to make a simple table, right? And this guy's a master carpenter. He's 80 years old. He's been doing carpentry since he's in his teens, right? And so he's demonstrating how to, how to attach, how to put in a screw. And he says, okay, I'll show you how to do this. And you say, oh, let's see, does a hammer work? And he says, I don't know, I think so. Yeah, we can use a hammer. And then it doesn't work. And he said, and then the next day he said, oh no, I think wait, let's use a screwdriver. It's kind of like that, right? A carpenter should know that to put in a screw, use a screwdriver, not a hammer. Could I give you other examples? I'm sure I could give you many, 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 many examples. You, dear listener, probably have some kind of specialty, right? This would be equivalent to somebody, in my view, say he's a famous concert pianist, right? He's a famous concert pianist, and you're his student, piano student, and you're studying a score, musical score, and you say, oh yeah, that's right. What's this clef again? Because say you're a beginner, and he says, let's see, I think that's F clef. Yeah, that's the F clef. Oh no, wait, that's the G clef. Wouldn't you think? Wait, what's going on here? This guy's been a concert pianist for years and years. He studied music with great people, and he can't tell the difference between a G clef and F clef. What's going on here anyway? Now, I'm not a scientist. Maybe this is a common error, but doesn't this seem a bit strange to you? Don't you think that Dr. Fauci, being an immunologist dealing with viruses, don't you think he would have asked or discovered, even set up experiments and studies to discover whether a mask is effective against a virus? I mean, this is like, it's not even, virology 101, it seems to me. You have 101 classes when you get to college. When you get to college, if you study mathematics, they're not going to go into 2 + 2 is 4. You know that already. And something like whether a mask is helpful against a virus would be something you would learn before you get to university. It's pre-101. And yet, he didn't seem to know? Is it Alzheimer's or what? Or is he secretly really retarded or could he maybe have been lying? Or what is this? And a few months later, oh yes, now you all need masks. Did you ask yourself that last year? I must admit, even I was negligent because there's so many subjects going on. And I thought, well, I guess maybe we don't need masks. Maybe they wouldn't help, like he said. And then a few months later, oh, yes, we do need masks because, it's getting so bad. Well, yeah, but if whether it's getting bad or not, if you're a single doctor working with the patient, okay, you're just one person, but you want to know how to protect yourself. So doesn't that seem strange to you? But now putting all of this together, in 2014, once again, he sees to it that the Wuhan Laboratory gets $3.5 million. In 2017, and I say this, of course, jokingly, but he turns psychic in quotes. He predicts during the Trump administration there's going to be a big pandemic. In 2019, he's involved in development of some SARS vaccine a year before it really hits the world. And in 2020, it hits the world, hits the US, and there he's saying we shouldn't wear masks. Now, how much of a genius you have to be to put those things together and come up with a theory, and yes, a conspiracy theory, but that's one that's worthy of, well, I wouldn't say worthy of Sherlock Holmes because you can just be a dumb TV detective. I don't know who a dumb one would be. Maybe one Psych. You ever see the comedy Psych? Those two clowns there. But they solve their cases. Guster, Burton, and Sean, right? If you can't put these things together, then I think there's something wrong with you, or you're such an ideologue defending Fauci, the great Dr. Fauci, and everything. Don't you see something suspicious and worthy of investigation there? The Wuhan Laboratory, from which most scientists say now this virus probably escaped from there. And what were they doing? Gain-of-function research and studying how viruses might be spread among the population. And this was in China. Everything they do in China must be given the government there. At the same time, you have people, I saw this one, an excerpt from Chinese TV with translation, of course, I don't understand Chinese, where some person from the government was saying, yes, in the future it would be possible to make viruses that can kill off certain races only. And if you think the Chinese aren't already developing that, or maybe they already have it, if you think they wouldn't do such a thing, you're living on another planet, let me tell you. So this Wuhan Laboratory to whose information the Chinese government has access, of course, because they can force them. Any company in China, the Chinese government can say, you tell us everything you know. So they're developing these things. These coronaviruses came from bats originally, trying to modify them and seeing how they might be dangerous to humans. That is, working, see, well, yeah, how might they spread to humans? In other words, learning how to spread them to humans, learning how to make them as infectious as possible. They're receiving financing from a Dr. Fauci in America in 2014, then and again in 2019, but I think all that money didn't get to him, according to the Newsweek article. In 2017, he makes the astounding psychic prediction that during the Trump administration, that's important here, they might see a big pandemic. Could it be that his masters in China, this is speculation, I made a speculation, could it be that, I don't know, deep state masters in China, whatever, said, Dr. Fauci, if necessary to get rid of this Trump, we're going to start a pandemic? Could it be that he had previous knowledge, or is he just psychic in 2017? Beginning of 2019, he's involved in the making of some kind, as Robert F. Kennedy pointed out in the article I just mentioned, in the making of some kind of a vaccine for SARS, on which he's going to earn a lot of money. And then in 2020, he tells us not to wear masks. Now, I don't know for sure. I hear more and more experts saying that the masks aren't going to help. I hear more and more experts pointing out those that aren't censored, which is a disgrace in itself, that in states like Texas and Florida, where you don't necessarily have to wear a mask, that the virus figures, the cases aren't going up there, and the deaths are not going up there. So it looks like masks really aren't helping. So maybe Dr. Fauci was right in the beginning, and he just got dumb later saying you should wear one mask or two masks. But the main thing here, my main point is, why would not a great expert in viruses, why wouldn't he know whether masks are helpful or not? Can you answer that? Does that not seem like total lunacy or total stupidity, or something else? And something else is not so pleasant to say. Could it be that Dr. Fauci knew the pandemic was going to break out because he was part of those who planned for the pandemic to break out? That would explain his psychic abilities, wouldn't it now? And could it be that because he gave money to the Wuhan Laboratory, he was involved in that? Could it be that the Chinese, whose great enemy was Donald J. Trump, because he was of course, putting the tariffs on Chinese goods, he was talking about bringing the factories back to America, and that could be the death of the Chinese economy. Could it be that they planned, if necessary, to get rid of this Trump, if the fake Russian collusion hoax doesn't work, and if some other things, that telephone call Trump made to the Ukraine, if that doesn't work, and if more sex scandals, like that ridiculous one about Trump raping a woman in some high-class clothing store in the 90s, but she just happened to still have the dress 30 years later hanging in her closet with DNA evidence, that story disappeared about a week because even the left didn't believe that one. And they're probably thinking, well, if all these things don't work, and this is what I thought when COVID first broke out. When that broke out, I thought, oh my God, this is how they're going to try to get rid of Trump. That was my first thought. Call me a psychic, I don't know. I think I'm more psychic than Dr. Fauci in any case. Could it be that that was a plan? We have to get rid of this Trump one way or the other, and this was a plan. Now, it might sound like a crazy conspiracy theory, but once again, the facts. Dr. Fauci, through that organization I mentioned in the article, sent $3.5 million to the laboratory in Wuhan in 2014. In 2017, he's predicting a great pandemic. In 2019, he's involved in the patent for a SARS vaccine a year before it broke out officially. And in 2020, he's telling people not to wear a mask, maybe because he wanted to spread as quickly as possible. Because at the very least, he's making money on the vaccines because it's connected to the pharmaceutical industry. I present these facts for your perusal, for your consideration. For those of you who haven't woken up to certain things, please look into this. Do your homework. Protest against the growing censorship, against people like me. Some of my articles I want to put on Facebook were censored. Things like this, I put up something by Robert F. Kennedy, and they say these are against our standards, etc. But look into the work that Robert F. Kennedy does. It's very good work about children's health, about saving children from the bad effects of certain vaccines. I don't know enough, as much as he does about vaccines. I had the smallpox vaccine, I believe, when I was a child. Polio vaccine I had, tuberculosis vaccine. And I'm not against all vaccines. But the vaccines today, listen to some of my other talks, I talk about that area. Warning, Will Robinson, like the robot in that old series, Lost in Space. Things are going on today that are absolutely terrifying, and relatively few people know about it. A good percentage do. But it seems like political left has closed their eyes, or they're totally hypnotized. And they talk as though I talked to one about a month or two ago. He said, oh no, Dr. Fauci's a hero, etc., etc. What planet are these people living on? They do no research. They think, one person I know, when I said you ought to get various sources of news, not just some, he said, I do have various sources. I said, what are they? He said, and seriously, and this very intelligent man, he said, well, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, and the Washington Post. I said, that's all left-wing media. He said, oh no, they're not. This is the mental state people are in. They're totally hypnotized. Listen to the evidence from both sides. If you're a leftist, fine. Listen to what Biden says, Kamala Harris, I don't care who. And then listen to what the people on Trump's side say. Compare. Think it through. Look at the evidence that both sides have. About election fraud, they say, what do they say? Trump's baseless claims of election fraud. As if it's one half-crazy ex-president, he says that, but that's baseless. Let me tell you, people, I've studied this from the beginning. It's not just Donald J. Trump. It is, in America, it's tens of millions of people who believe election fraud. It's thousands and thousands who have looked into this, well, probably millions looked into it more carefully. I've looked at the evidence. Read just the Navarro report, Navarro. Peter Navarro, great economist. I've listened to some economy course of his. This very intelligent man. Look at all the evidence there. Listen to Sidney Powell, the evidence that she's presented. Look at the evidence. And you tell me that really, no, the election wasn't stolen. If you say that, you're a fool or a liar, or you're totally hypnotized. And I don't see any other possibilities. It's not just one stupid ex-president's baseless claims of election fraud. They put it that way so nobody will believe it. The election in 2020 was stolen. I predict, let me play psychic here. You will know this in the end. I say by the end of the year, the entire world will know this. The evidence will be made clear to every person in the world by that time. This is what I predict. When that happens, don't send me letters of congratulation. Oh, David, you're a great psychic. How do you know? No, I do have a little psychic ability, but this has nothing to do with that. You study all the evidence out there. You look at both sides. You look at all sides, all opinions, and you look for the evidence. And you follow the trails of evidence and you connect the dots. That's how you know things. You do not know things by watching only Fox News, only CNN, or maybe CNN and reading the New York Times. They're both agents of the left, let me tell you. That will come out in the future too. That's another prediction of mine. And with the magnificent Dr. Fauci, that I do fault Trump with that in part. Well, Trump, what does he know about medicine? Really? Well, okay, to his credit, he mentioned hydroxychloroquine. Do you know there's a growing number of doctors, some have claimed to have healed hundreds of people who had coronavirus using hydroxychloroquine, and I think it was hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and vitamin D. Trump was right on that. However, keeping Fauci for so long, I think he did that just to appease the left, and because when people, if they had fired him, they would have said, oh, look, he's not following the path of science. I think Trump was a fool in that respect. I would have fired Fauci as soon as he first told people not to wear a mask and then said they should wear a mask. Said, you don't know what you're talking about. Look up, I don't know if they saw it on YouTube, they might have censored it. It's an interesting conversation between Dr. Rand Paul, it was like a Zoom talk, to Fauci, criticizing Fauci for the things he was doing. And Fauci looked like a kid that didn't know what to say. Rand Paul was destroying him. Look for things like that. Maybe you'll only find one on BitChute, because YouTube, of course, is censoring big time, as is Facebook. As is Google, that's more subtle. I noticed that last year, and I said to people on Facebook, it looks to me like they're censoring, because I think it was about the Hunter Biden thing. And I put about this scandal, Hunter Biden, before the election, and I wouldn't get any results for days in Google. And DuckDuckGo got one result out there. Google was censoring the results. And they said, oh, no, that's just because of what you looked at before the algorithms of Google. No, I've seen concrete evidence. Google is censoring. When you put in something looking for information, if it's something the left supports, you'll find it in excess. If it's the alternative view, whether it's COVID, whether it's election fraud, you won't see as many results. a lot of results are simply censored by Google. And I can tell you that for a fact because I experienced it again and again. This is why I go to DuckDuckGo. Sad times we're living in. But I'll ask you this, even if you don't agree with some things, I don't know, just because you've been hypnotized by certain political forces, ask yourself that question. How is it possible, and I'll end with this note too, how is it possible that one of the world's greatest virologists, immunologists, a man who's worked all his life with little bichos, they say in Spanish, with little microbes and germs, that he doesn't know then when it really hits? And he predicted it in 2017, remember, the great psychic Fauci. And then when it finally does hit, I don't know if you know, no, I don't think masks are going to help. In a few months, oh yes, we need a mask. I can think of one logical explanation, that he thought, well, maybe masks would help a little bit, but we don't want that. We want it to spread as much as possible, because then I'm going to make more money when they need vaccines. That's one version. That would make total sense, wouldn't it? Or even, looking in a more evil direction, he's part of the big state conspiracy to get people to take one vaccine after the other. The danger of that, listen to some of my other talks and you hear what the great danger of that is. I won't get into that now. That is terrifying, but it would be totally logical from the point of view of certain political forces in the world. It's not crazy conspiracy theory. And one note about that, listen to, I think it was my very first talk. People use conspiracy theory as a synonym for, insanity or something. That's like saying, it's so stupid to say that, because it's like saying, you have an opinion? Oh, you must be crazy. Think about that. You say, well, let me express my opinion. Oh, your opinion? You must be crazy. An opinion could be crazy. It could be very wise. It depends on what the opinion is. A conspiracy theory could be crazy. There are many of them out there. And it could be very wise and right on the mark. It depends on what the conspiracy theory is. It depends on the evidence. To say that election fraud is a crazy conspiracy theory is, I'll put it in one word, it's stupid. It is stupid to say that. It's stupid to think that. Why? Because it depends on the evidence. You can only say that if you have studied the evidence presented by the other side, just as the defense attorney is obligated to study the evidence that the prosecutor presents, and the prosecutor must study the evidence that the defense presents. And if you haven't studied that evidence, if you rely on CNN, New York Times, MSNBC, and Washington Post in your information about possible election fraud, my God, I don't know what to say. You have been hypnotized. You're like a prosecutor or like a defense attorney that doesn't bother to look at the evidence of the prosecution. Oh, that's all ridiculous. That's conspiracy theory. You'd have to be the most stupid defense attorney in all of history. Wouldn't you now? Can you imagine a defense attorney? He has a client that he's defending in court, and the prosecutor starts with Your Honor, let me present Exhibit A. And the defense attorney says, oh, that's all conspiracy theory. That's ridiculous. That's all a bunch of lies. What kind of defense attorney is that? Fortunately, there you have a judge saying, silence now. Keep quiet here. We want to hear the evidence. So if you're a leftist, I'll put it this way, a Democrat, whatever you want to call it, and you really believe CNN, Washington Times, etc. Okay, that's one side of the story. There was no election fraud. Okay, read what they say. Read what CNN says, Washington Post, etc. But then you're obligated, ethically, I will tell you, to see what all these crazy conspiracy theorists, the tens of millions out there, it's not just 2 or 3, it's tens of millions, saying there was election fraud. People like Peter Navarro, great economist, read the report he wrote. Listen to what Sidney Powell says. Look at the evidence. Study the evidence from the other side. And then come to a conclusion. Along the way, you might ask yourself the question of how it's possible that a presidential candidate that got as few as 12 people attending his rallies. There was one rally of Biden, there was 12 people. Another, I think there was 35 people. Another was 50 people. In Trump's rallies, you got like 10,000, 20,000. One, I think it was 50,000 or something. How could somebody like Biden ever win an election? In the summer of last year, I predicted if Biden, somebody said, do you think Biden could win? I said, if he wins, it's only because of massive election fraud. A candidate like that cannot win an election. And then what do we see? Looks like Trump's totally going to win. But then during the night, these strange things happen. Look at the evidence for your own sake. Because I tell you, the evidence is known, will be presented, and the election results are going to be overturned. Now, when this happens, you have a choice of two things. I hope you listen to this recording again, say by the end of the year. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, by the end of the year, almost certainly, I think, sooner. When this happens, when the election results are overturned, you will have a choice, as far as your view of me is concerned. You can either say, wow, that David is truly a psychic. He's a psychic. He predicted that to me. Because the election has been overturned, he was right. Or you can be a bit more realistic there and say, well, David apparently had source of information that I wasn't looking at. I was only looking at one side of it. And I'm telling you this for the future as well. Everything we do today is really for the future, isn't it? To get to a slightly more distanced philosophical level. What we do today isn't about yesterday. It's about the future. Even if the future is only 1 minute from now. So for the future, I suggest to you, no matter who you are, and believe me, if you're a Trump supporter, be critical of Trump as well where he deserves it. Because I think in some things he does deserve it. And look at what the other side, always look at what the other side's saying. But we're living in a world now where we have, in the official news, mainstream media, we hear constantly what one side's saying, and meanwhile they're censoring everything the other side's saying. Warning, warning, Will Robinson. What this means is that we're going in the direction of dictatorship. That's the way dictatorships always start. And if you don't know that, you don't know much about history. And if you don't recognize it, if you think, that could never happen to us, well, look for one of my talks in the future about precisely that. The idea, oh, this could never happen to us. And I'll open your eyes in that respect too. But for now, to round up and to summarize, look a little more into the magnificent Dr. Fauci and explain to me, tell me why it's not suspicious that the same man who saw to it that $3.5 million were sent to the Wuhan Laboratory in China, where they're doing gain-of-function research, look that up so you know what that is, and how these viruses might spread more quickly to humans. And that same man that then 3 years later predicted the outbreak of a pandemic in the presidency of Trump, the same man who was involved in a patent for a SARS vaccine 1 year before it broke out, and the same man that was telling us first, well, you don't need masks, this great expert, well, you don't need masks, I don't think that's necessary. A few months later, oh yes, you better wear masks. If you don't find something fishy about all that, then I don't know what planet you're living on. I would just suggest that you finally wake up. And with that, my dear listeners, having got a bit passionate, but I decided at the beginning I'm going to do that because that is my style. When I see things that are just beyond belief in their stupidity or in the tremendousness of their terrible import, I'm going to get emotional when I see fit. But always following the light of reason as well, always analyzing, always trying to see both sides of any issue, and always analyzing each of those sides, and always eternally questioning to get even further in my search for the truth, because all of that is the path of Socrates. I wish you a fine day or night wherever you are. Bye now.